Tá, ok, tá, pronto, já estamos? Pronto, já? Bom dia, malta, bom dia a todos, bravo, obrigado. Bem-vindos à terceira edição do What Would You Do, Season 3. Esta season começa a adensar assim, é de Season 3, não é?
Sim. Começou hoje.
Começa hoje a terceira.
Sim.
Começa hoje a terceira, a segunda acabou. A segunda acabou com a endodontia, que não apresentou, mas que não tem os pós-operatórios.
Sim. É isso.
Está bem? Pronto. E começa hoje a terceira season da incrível sessão de... Estou? Bem-vindos à terceira edição, é um prazer estar com vocês, caros membros do júri, caros companheiros. A terceira edição vai ser marcada por um adensar da trama, ok? Um adensar da trama, a malta começa a entrar em tópicos mais quentes, mais do dia-a-dia, da sociedade civil, onde as pessoas gostam de haver mortes e suicídios e tal, porque um faz assim, o outro faz assado. E portanto não vamos aqui deixar nada por dizer, quer na implantologia, quer na prostodontia, quer na ortodontia, quer na higiene oral, quer nos técnicos de laboratório, quer nas assistentes dentárias. Este semestre a Soraya vai ter que apresentar, ela ainda não sabe, mas vai ter que apresentar e acabou a conversa, vai ter que apresentar, depois para dar-lhe a boa novidade, ou ela pode ver o programa. Bom, antes de começarmos, queria assinalar aqui um dado muito especial. Esta semana a equipa IAD atingiu o 1000º implante. Bravo! Conseguimos chegar à barreira dos 1000 implantes colocados, não sabia, foi a atualização que fizemos ontem, aquilo passou a barreira, foi como assim, ping! E portanto toda a equipa está de parabéns, não é um feito só da implantologia, é um feito também não, é só um feito da implantologia, não é nada, é um feito da clínica toda, que muito lutou por estes 1000 implantes e portanto ficamos muito contentes por esta marca. O nosso objetivo obviamente são os 100.000, portanto ainda faltam 99.000, portanto ainda temos muito implante a colocar, mas mesmo assim vamos assinalar. Tragas aí o champanhe. Depois. Bom.
Espera, deixa-me só fazer aqui uma coisa.
O João ia dizer... ok. No quê?
Eu quero fazer espetáculo.
Bom, vamos ao tema, vamos à ação, vamos à ciência. Esta semana decidi pôr um caso que... Espera aí, a gente faz isto em inglês ou em português ou em inglês? Já não me lembro. Em inglês. Okay, sorry, it was in English, okay? Very briefly, we just achieved our 1,000 implants, so we're on the 1,000 club. So all the team is congratulations. We hit our 1,000 implants. Of course, there were people that are going to say, oh, only 1,000, and some people are going to say, oh, 1,000. So we don't care, it's our 1,000, so we're very happy. The aim is 100,000, so we have 99,000 more to go. So, okay? So let's go to the topic. So I place you this case that apparently is a simple case, okay? But this is the cases where there is a lot of discussion about it because, you know, some people have an idea of the case, on how to solve the case. Some others have other ideas to solve the case. They are both right. There's no right and wrong. As long as the patient is happy with the crown and the implant, it's okay. But there are some items here that I want to discuss with you about the decision making to what seems like a simple case. So I told you I have a first molar with 6 millimeter residual bone. You have a good cortical, coronal cortical. You have a good apical cortical on the sinus. And so you have 6 millimeters of bone in terms of height. You have a lot of bone in width. Width is not a problem. And so what I asked you was, okay, there are many more options to go, but I tried to put here the ones that are trendy right now, and you know, you see a lot of this in social media, in meetings, in congresses, in televisions. So I decided to bring these options here. The first one was, okay, We do a normal subcrestal approach. It means that we place the implant 2 millimeters deeper into bone. And then because we don't have space apical, because we have the sinus, then if you're going subcrestal, you immediately have to go to a sinus lift approach, either if you're a closed or lateral approach. Because if you have an 8 millimeter subcrestal or 6 millimeter, if you only have 6 millimeters of bone and you place subcrestal 2, that means that your implant is going to for sure entering the sinus and then put you in a position that you have to graft, okay, or do something in the sinus, okay? That's the first option. Second one, I said, well, some people say, well, Brandmark in 1984 told us that if you enter 2 millimeters on the sinus, there is no problem. So I place my implant subcrestal and just leave it bicortical with no graft on the apical because it's not important. It's a sinus, no one's gonna die. There is no reflection towards the survival rate of the implant. Okay, so it's another option in here. And then I moved to the supracrestal approach, okay? Instead of going subcrestal, you know, there are a lot of people that says, well, here I don't need to go deeper. I need to, go supra instead of going into the bone. I have to be outside the bone with the implant. So the supracrestal part was here. And normally when you go for a supracrestal approach, that means that you have more contact with the bone. So a 6 millimeter, it's a 6 millimeter implant. You're not going deeper with 2 millimeters. So in that case, you normally don't need a sinus elevation. And the question here was, what platform do you use? Because this is a molar. Do you use a wide platform or a regular platform? And this is very important because if you're going for a subcrestal position, normally you don't have wide intermediate abutments, okay? So there's different concepts, different rehabilitation types, different implant positions. Again, they're all right, okay? There's no right and wrong. I'm just gonna show you how we solve our case. So, results, okay? We had 248 views of the post, and means that 36% of you, 36 people, almost 40 people voted, okay? To my surprise, okay, no one voted on a regular tissue level implant with no sinus elevation, okay? It's 0%, okay? Which means that the entire fleet of Straumann, you know, was like, whoa, 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 no one's going for the tissue level? Oh my God, no one's going for the tissue level. So the majority of you guys voted, okay, I'm a subcrestal fan, let's bury the implant 2 millimeters. And then because we have to bury the implant, then we have to do some sort of lateral or transcrestal sinus elevation. So 58% of you would go in that direction, okay? 70% of you said, no, 6 millimeters for me is more than enough. I'm gonna place a subcrestal implant and I'm going to perforate the cortical and I'm gonna place the implant there by cortical. It's a nice option. And 25% of you said, okay, I'm going supracrestal, but I'm not going with a narrow platform, I'm going with a wide platform, okay? So these were the results, okay? So first of all, okay, sinus elevation. We love to go to the sinus, okay? We go to the sinus every day, okay? I'm going, you know, answer by answer, so you more or less understand the rationale of the treatment plan. We love to go to the sinus, okay? We love doing sinus elevation. We are very tuned in sinus elevation. So when we don't have any bone at all, crestal bone, there is impossible to go with short implants. We don't have 4 millimeter. Then obviously we go for the sinus elevation and place long implants. And it works, it works. It's one of the most predictable techniques in guided bone regeneration. It's a sinus elevation. Almost if you know the technique, you just, you know, open the sinus, go to the medial wall, and graft, okay? So one of the gold standards of a good sinus elevation is blood supply to the area, okay? So this is very important in order to choose which one is the best technique. So if you go to the studies of Steve Wallace and Dennis and Sang Chung Cho that they did in the early 2000s, you clearly see a difference on the vital bone if you elevate the sinus toward the middle wall, okay? And why the middle wall? Because the middle wall is the one that has the blood supply to your graft, okay? You cannot rely on the crestal because this is almost cortical, so there is no cells, there is no blood cells that can, colonize your graft. The Schneiderian membrane has almost no vascularization, so it doesn't bring any osteogenic paths to the graft in here. So the gold standard is open to the medial wall, put your graft in and let it heal, okay? If you do this technique, then you will have success in your vital bone formation, okay? Like we do in several situations, okay? But we also have in the portfolio the short implants, okay? That's another technique, okay? If you have 4, 6, 8 millimeters, okay, then you have space to squeeze a short implant, okay? It just, you have to choose between, the brands and the amount of short implants that you have, the best that will do the case. And guess what? They're working, okay? The short implants, it's clearly, with no doubt, now in 2024, that the short implants work. They have a survival rate on the 10-year run of 90%. It's a little bit lower than the regular implants that have 98%. Of course, you can understand, as long as you're shortening the implant, you're decreasing the bone-to-implant contact. So obviously, the survival rate is less. So that's no discussion. But it's still 90%. So you have to present this statistic and this data to the patient when he asks you, should I go for a sinus elevation or should I go for a short implant? Because 90% of survival rate, we're still in a high position, okay? Just remember that the smokers in the Crawford-Bain literature had survival rates of 88%. And we still place implants in 88% of survival rate, okay? With smoking cessation protocols and all of that. So they have in our hands also, that is very important, our experience is also very good with short implants, okay? Either on the maxillary, either on the mandible, in the 6 millimeters implants, the different macro geometries, they are working very fine. Supracrestal and subcrestal, okay? It doesn't matter the philosophy. What it matters if you can control the technique, if you can squeeze these implants in the correct way, they will hold throughout times. It's 90% over 10 years. It's probably even higher with this new macro geometry of implants that we have. Now, in this situation, it's normally what you see in the short implants, okay? Normally what you see in this type of 6 millimeters, you do your osteotomy, and what you see downstairs is the Schneiderian membrane, okay? So now is the question what you're gonna do. You're gonna bicorticalize your implant, or you're gonna try to lift the membrane to gain 2 or 3 millimeters, okay? But just don't forget one thing that I told you on the sinus elevation. When you start to do transcrestal approaches, you're not exposing the middle wall, okay? So that means that your capacity, your capability of osteoblasts to colonize your graft or something is very much reduced. The amount of vital bone that we will have there is reduced, okay? You can squeeze xenograft over there, but what you probably end up is with a lot of proportion of xenograft, a lot of proportion of connective tissue, and a low quantity of vital bone, okay? Just don't forget that. The vital bone is on the native bone of the patient, okay? So imagine that if you have it here and now you want to put this subcrestal, you're going to lose about 2 millimeters of this vital bone, okay? You're going to lose because there is no osseointegration on the abutment, okay? There's only osseointegration on the implant. So you have to bear in mind all of these thoughts, okay? And latest, we have new development of technology of the short implants, okay? It's not the short implants of the past, okay? We have, limited macro geometry. Industry moved toward amplifying the bone-to-implant contact by creating macro geometries that can really hold this bone and have more surface contact to the osseointegration pattern, okay? And as you can see here, this is 6 by 6 by 6, 6 by 5 by 6. It's actually wider than in length, okay? So you have here, if you can take a look, you see the macro geometry of this implant is totally different than a traditional tissue level, okay? You see the aggressive threads, you see the more bone to implant contact, the anchorage on the cortical part. So this implant is built with all these features to really increase the performance of these implants throughout time, okay? And lately, we have the 4 millimeter. We were trying out the 4 millimeters, and the short implants now have a new kid in town that's, you know, still need a lot of evidence behind, but the science is pushing this for shorter implants with high hydrophilic surfaces, high bone to implant contact that can really help to, you know, try not to go for guided bone regeneration in the posterior mandible. And of course, you can see that, you know, we're really pushing the limit with these short implants, leaving only 4 millimeters of osseointegration to integrate. And they seem to work okay. So, back to our case. So we have to make a decision on what to do here, okay? What are we going to do here, okay? So in our case, what we did was we follow more or less the literature, more or less because we don't follow 100%. Some part is the literature, some part is the patient, and some part is your clinical expertise. Always like this. If you're only going to follow the literature and you don't know what you're doing, forget it. There is no, you'll not succeed in clinical reality, okay? You have to know what you are good at and also have to listen to the patient. You can say, oh, I'm going to do a transcrestal sinus lift, but if the patient says, I don't want any sinus lift, what are you going to do? You're not going to place the implant? Of course you're going to place the implant. Then you think about, well, the 6 millimeter may work because in the literature I can find articles that work. It's always like this. You can find articles pro and you can find articles against, okay? Because when everything works well in different hands, then it kind of gets tricky to know what is the best clinical performance that you should have. So, what is the literature saying about the short millimeters? They work, okay? They work, there is no doubt. What is the literature saying about osteotomes, sinus floor elevation, transcrestal? It says it's dubious, okay? It's dubious because it is not clear that it brings an improved performance of the implants throughout the time, okay? Maybe what you're doing is something for the x-ray and not for the actual performance of the implant long term, okay? Because the native bone and the bone to implant contact of the native part is the one that is doing your job. So in this, by having this in mind, okay, you want to potentialize the 6 millimeters that you have by not losing any crestal bone, okay? Because if you're doing subcrestal positions, then you're not allowing those 2 millimeters to perform on the osseointegration level, okay? So for us, and again, I say there is no right and wrong, you can do whatever you want, okay? But for us, it's clear that this is a 6 millimeter implant bicortical, okay? You hit the cortical of the bone, you engage there, you engage the cortical of the coronal part, and then the only thing that you have to decide is what is the emergency profile that you're going to use, okay? Because in the ultimate decision, it's not even surgical. It's prosthodontic, okay? Because I'm always telling Berta, okay, I can put a 6 millimeter implant, but how are you going to restore this implant, okay? How are you going to restore? What is the biomaterial that is behind? Are you going to use a PMMA? Are you going to use a disilicate, a monolithic stratified? What's the occlusion? Is this a favorable case or not? So when combining all of these, is that you have to decide which is the best implant. So in this case, you know, you do the diagnostic wax-up, we send it to Mariana here, and she builds a nice molar. And when you put this on Co-Diagnostics or any implant software, you can clearly see that if you want to go supracrestal, the best platform for this kind of emergency profile is a wide platform. It's not a regular neck platform, it's a wide platform. It is the one that has, you know, the emergency profile correct for this case. And that's what we did, okay? So in this case, it's probably the only area that nowadays I do flapless approach is a posterior area on the molars, because I think I cannot miss, sometimes I miss, okay? But normally in this type of bone, I cannot miss the bone. So I just took a little bit, a circular mucoperiosteal elevator, remove it like a little cap, then place the implant in a flapless approach, and put your healing abutment, okay? So you have an overview of a wide implant going in. So this is a 4x5, this is a 4.5 millimeter by 6 with a wide platform, you know, for the emergency profile of the molar, okay? So we have an overview here of implant insertion, okay? Now this is the X-ray at the day of the insertion. You can see here that the cortical grabs, the apical portion grabs the cortical of the sinus, and then it will not only increase the primary stability, but is very important to hold the osseointegration throughout time, okay? The only factor that we see in our 1,000 cases, some of them are short implants, if you do not engage this cortex, you know, probably this is the ones of the 10% that don't osseointegrate, or that they can be lost in the later phase, okay? So it's very important that you engage the cortical of this part, okay? And then you see the wide platform, okay? This is after osseointegration, okay? You see the wide platform of the implant. Here you have, okay? So now the emergency profile is created in a supracrestal implant. So now the oral rehabilitation will have to go in. In this case, we decided for a desilicate. We can do a what would you do session on the biomaterials in another session. In this case, we went for a desilicate crown, simple case, we mill it, we place the interface, the vario base, the tie base, whatever you want to call it, whatever the system you're using, and we place the crown, you know, restoring the occlusion. We still need to make better composites, so do better composites, okay, in the adjacent teeth, but at the end, you know, if you check the occlusion, if you select your biomaterials right, you can see that you have a 6 millimeter implant, bicortical with the desilicate crown, supracrestal, you know, maintaining that bone volume, not losing any crestal bone along the way, okay? So, this was our option, okay? This how we handle the case. It's not the only option, it's not the best option, it's the option that we use, okay? So thank you very much.